I heard about the Cosmic Radio competition from a fellow YouTuber named Azalea. The goal of the competition was to write an original piece of music for a rhythm game. The first place winner would receive a $7,000 cash prize and a VST plugin worth $1,800. The top 20 winners would also receive various cash prizes and plugins. Even if you didn't place in that top 20, you still had the opportunity to have your song featured in one of the rhythm games sponsoring the competition. I love writing music and I'm also super competitive, so I was very interested. The competition was open to all genres of music, but based on the past winners and the fact that the song was for a rhythm game, the obvious choice was to write an EDM piece. The only problem was, I'm a jazz musician, I don't really know anything about EDM. So I had 2 months to not only write a good song, but also a song in a genre I was completely unfamiliar with. I worked on my song for 2 months and then waited another 4 months for the announcement stream. I woke up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning to watch the stream live, and after 6 months of obsessing over this competition, I didn't win any of the prizes. No cash, no plugins, and no featured song in any of the rhythm games. So I lost the competition. Does that mean that the song I wrote is bad? In this video, we'll be answering that question as I break down my Cosmic Radio competition song, Star Circuit 7. I'll discuss the composition elements I used, as well as some of the EDM techniques I learned while writing this piece of music. One thing that I'm particularly proud of is that this song has so many concurrent layers. I grouped them into these categories. We have plucks, we've got some lead sounds, we got all the synth sparkly stuff, harmony, which is pianos and keyboards, we got all the drums, and then finally this category at the very bottom is all the transition effects that I used. All of these little effects really help to create a lot of momentum and fill up the space sonically in the song. So the first thing I want to point your attention to is that the song is in 7/4 predominantly. You could take a look at this top bar here, where my cursor is. You can see mostly 7/4. There are some sporadic 8/4 measures, just any time that I thought that the music needed an extra beat of breath, usually at the end of a section. Most EDM songs are in 4/4, so I was hoping that using this mixed meter concept would make my song more unique. Now let's take a look at this melody. This melody is actually the very first thing that I wrote. You'll notice as we listen to this melody that it rises and falls, varies in intensity, and I did something special with the form of the melody. See if you can listen to it. So the melody has an odd form. The first half of this melody is 4 measures, while the second half is another 6 measures. This creates a 10-bar form. 10-bar forms are pretty rare. Most song forms are even groupings divisible by 4, like 32-measure forms or a 12-bar blues. The 10-bar form here already makes the song unique. I also leverage this form to create harmonic surprises as well. Another cool fact about this melody is that it solely uses the diatonic notes of A-flat major. That's these notes here. This is particularly odd for me because my compositional style utilizes so much modal interchange and modal mixture. My melodies usually end up having chromatic out-of-key moments. This means that any borrowed chords that I used in the melody sections are created to sit underneath a diatonic note, holding it all together. Now let's take a listen to this section again and focus on the instruments that fill out the higher frequencies in the mix. While doing my research and listening to past competition winners, I noticed that EDM music has a lot of information in the higher frequencies. This is different to other music like my favorite genre of jazz, in which the acoustic instruments don't reach into those upper echelons. To fill out these registers, I added instruments like the Ice Glockenspiel and the synth pluck. I panned the Ice Glock hard left and hard right to give it a wide stereo image. This Glockenspiel has a different part in each of our 3 representations of the main melody. Let's listen to this part just by itself. This is just a little pretty thing that sits on top of everything, this counter melody that's woven in between the melody line. Additionally, we have this pluck here. Specifically because we lack percussion in the beginning of this song, I added this pluck here so that the player, if they're playing this in a rhythm game, would feel the beat of the song. I used Vital, which is an incredible free program. To make this so percussive, I made sure that the attack and the decay were very, very steep. If I were to drag this over, it would sound completely different. The steep attack and decay really helps to make this sound percussive and keep a sense of beat or pulse throughout the beginning of the song. Rhythmically, this pulse is picked up later by the claps, which come down here. Between the rhythmic pluck and this percussion part, the claps, I'm able to create a sense of momentum and drive and pulse, even though we don't have that many percussive elements. Let's take a look at how all of these elements interact with each other. Let's listen to this whole section again. Personally, I love music that has a melodic, harmonic, rhythmic, and textural surprises, so I try to create similar surprises in my own music. Adding unexpected elements is a main motif in this song, and you'll notice all these unexpected elements as we go through the breakdown. Let's move on to the next section of the song. To mark this section as different than the first, I add a ton of percussion stuff. Because the percussion is so limited, I thought adding this percussion element in the second section would help to make the song grow as we go from the beginning to the second part. So you can hear that I add the whole drum kit now. Let's listen to just the drum kit and see what's going on here. There are many different ways to write drum patterns in 7/4. In this song, I decided to go with the 4+3 note grouping. That first grouping of 4 quarter notes is treated just like 4/4. The grouping of 3 notes, however, needs special attention. I decided here to place a kick on the first beat, a snare on the second beat, and then a drum fill of some sort on that third beat. This allows me to navigate the odd meter and sets the drums up for a natural sounding return to the very next measure. The other element in this groove is this open hi-hat. You'll notice that the open hi-hat is only occurring on those upbeat passages. By placing the open hi-hat only on the upbeat, we create a classic disco pattern. Later, this pattern is picked up by the ride bell, doing the exact same rhythm. This ride bell sound is my favorite. Let's listen again. Altogether, this drum groove sounds natural in 7/4 and is designed to make people want to dance. Now let's take a look at this synth part over here. There are these two synth sounds. So both of these synth sounds are covering this A-flat sus shape, which is these notes here. If you listen carefully, you'll notice that this lower synth, also known as the panning synth, is being panned hard left and hard right in the stereo field. Let's listen to just this one right here. You can even notice on the far right-hand side of the screen where these red dots are that these numbers are flying back and forth. These numbers represent where this synth sound is in our stereo field. We also have this synth sound right here, this arpeggio. To make it carry a lot of momentum in the sound, I used a special effect used often in EDM, which is called a phaser. If I extend the envelope and hold down this note, you'll hear what the phaser does. It shifts the texture of the sound as it's being played. So because the sound is constantly changing, it creates a lot of textural momentum. Let's listen to how all of these elements fit together again. Our next section is another iteration of the main melody. When writing this section, I knew I needed to make musical choices so that this section sounds new and fresh, despite utilizing the same melody and chord progression from before. While you listen, focus first on the percussion elements. So the compositional technique that I use here is called stop time. Stop time is a technique in which instruments play rhythmic hits together with silences in between. Really, the name stop time is inaccurate because time is still flowing. It's just that by playing rhythmic hits with pauses in between, it sounds like time is stopping and starting. Let's listen to all the sounds that play this rhythmic hit. That is the bass, the kick, and the keyboard parts. Between these sections of stop time, we have another drum feel. This is what's called 4 on the floor. 4 on the floor is a drum pattern in which the kick drum plays on every quarter note in the measure. That's this section right here. You'll also have noticed that all the other drum sounds are gone. We don't have our snare, we don't have our hi-hat, we only have this kick. And that is specifically to highlight this 4 on the floor feel. You might be able to call this a 7 on the floor pattern instead, although that does sound kind of weird, doesn't it? Altogether, the stop time and 7 on the floor kick drum groove creates a nice, dancey, pulsing feel. Let's listen to this again. Because these stop time rhythms create gaps in the sound, I knew that I needed to fill up the space in another way, and that's where the synth sound comes in. Just like the synth before, I use an EDM production technique to create this sound which carries a lot more space than it would otherwise. In this case, I use an effect called delay. That's what's in this pink over here. Basically what's happening is I play a single note and then it has this great echo which comes after it. I'm going to play just this A flat here one time, and you can see how many iterations of this song echoes after it. Pretty cool, right? The delay helps the synth sound cover a wider space than it would without it. Let's listen carefully without the delay, and then with the delay. Much better, right? We also have this Ice Glockenspiel. It's playing a different part than the first time. This is my favorite iteration of the Ice Glockenspiel just because of these 3 notes right here. This D natural here is so bright and unexpected, it makes this version of the Ice Glockenspiel my favorite in the whole song. Let's listen in context. Just a beautiful note. Let's listen to this section one more time before moving along. All right, and now on to the next section. Now, you might have noticed this section is identical to the first vamp section in a couple ways. These two elements, the panning synth and this arpeggio, are identical to the first section. It's so interesting because the first vamp section has a completely different chord progression than this section. So let's take a look. Our first vamp section that we heard earlier is up here. You notice that there's a lot of A-flat minor sounds in here. It's really built on this A-flat minor world. However, the second vamp down here has a completely different sonic palette. We have major sounds, A major 7 sharp 11, we got B9s, we got some more major sounds and dominant sounds down here. To make both of these chord progressions work with that A-flat sus shape on top staying stagnant the whole time is really a harmonic puzzle. So I'm quite proud at how these two chord progressions turned out. In what ways is this section different from the first vamp section though? Let's take a listen again. The most notable difference is found with this tunnel effect. The tunnel effect is most notable right here at the end of the previous section. What's going on here is I used an auto filter to do this low pass filter. It cuts off all of the high frequencies. Let's take a look at the filter as it goes. I used to have this auto filter just be on the main channel. However, when it came to master the project, it started glitching and clipping. So if anyone in the comments knows, I'd love to know how to use this auto filter effect on the whole song without it glitching during the mastering process. Instead of using an auto filter, I had to compromise and use this EQ. Take a look at the number 5 specifically right here. You'll notice that this EQ rises as the section goes on. It creates a lot of forward momentum. The last thing to note is that we start this bass ostinato, which sounds like this. This is a pattern that I'm going to bring into the next section, so make sure you remember it. And now we come to my favorite section in the whole piece. This section is a beautiful combination of jazz, EDM, and drum and bass elements. So what jazz elements did you notice? Obviously we have this crazy synth solo, but to find the other jazz elements, let's take a look at the percussion. So the ride cymbal, the cymbal used in this section, has a long history in jazz, especially in swing. That's why I wanted to include it as a color here. The ride pattern has 4 variations marked by the different colored blocks. We have green, yellow, light blue, and dark blue. Each of these blocks is a slight variation in which I move these 2 little accent notes, these quick notes, I move them around in time. So in the green block, it sounds like this. The next block, you'll notice it's in a different place in the measure. When a live, masterful jazz drummer is playing, the ride cymbal is like a fire, ever changing from moment to moment, yet when you take a look from afar, it has the same character throughout. These colored blocks are my attempt to emulate the ever-changing live drummer's ride cymbal pattern. The same effect happens with our snare drum. We have these colored blocks again, which mark different variations. Specifically, the snare drum pattern is my 7/4 adaptation of the famous Amen break, a drum sample that's been referenced in thousands of tracks, especially in drum and bass music. This Amen break pattern is noted for its ghosted notes, which are in the darker color here. Sounds like this. Similarly to the jazz ride cymbal, jazz snare drum is noted for its ghosted notes and endless variations, which is why I have these 4 colored blocks which attempt to emulate a live drummer's intricacies. Now let's take a listen to the section as a whole again, especially to this synth solo. This solo is an amalgamation of my saxophone playing and my compositional voice, leading to the perfect solo, unfettered by my instrumental fluidity. So if we take a look at the MIDI roll for this solo here, other than having a ton of notes, it has a different intensity graph than most normal solos. The most common solo shape is a rising line. Let's imagine this y-axis as intensity and this x-axis as time. The most common shape looks like this, in which the solo begins at a lower intensity, and then as the solo continues, they get busier and busier, and they eventually increase in intensity until there's a musical climax at the end of the solo. However, I didn't use this shape in the solo that I wrote here. Instead, I go for another one, which is a U shape. In this one, we start out with a lot of intensity, we calm down in the middle, and then we bring the intensity back up for an incredible finish. The reason I wanted to use this shape is because right out of the gate, I wanted the jazz elements just to hit the listener in the face with a lot of intensity. Let's take a listen to this effect. In the context of this song, we have this little count off, which is like a racing countdown from like Mario Kart or something, and we immediately go into this crazy solo. That's why I think that this U shape is really the best for this solo's intensity graph. Behind all of this solo madness, I place this super long white noise riser right here. This white noise riser is incredibly long. It lasts for 23 seconds. And the whole time, we're slowly increasing this autofilter. Let's take a listen. You can take a listen as this autofilter increases. Our white noise sound is just rising, and it does so for 23 seconds straight. The last thing to note of this section, which is a little bit different, is we continue this bass ostinato from before. And this is now. This time, instead of keeping the bass ostinato the same, I alter it as we get towards the middle of the solo. This creates more harmonic opportunities and wider range of colors. Let's listen to all of these elements combined together. After a super intense jazz-heavy section, I thought the piece needed some breathing room. I achieved that with some reverse reverb and some chimes. And then we go right into our beautiful acoustic piano solo. Then when the whole band kicks in, I try to reference as many sections of the song as I can. See if you can listen and try to figure out which sections I'm referencing. Let's go through the list of references. I use the same melody and chord progression from the beginning of the song. I have this disco hi-hat here, which is referencing the disco hi-hat from the first vamp. I referenced 7 on the floor kick pattern for melody 2. I added some stop time rhythms right at the beginning. There is a synth solo counter melody which rests just behind the main melody, and then the Isaac Glockenspiel is playing its final variation. As we cross the finish line, I throw in one last rhythmic surprise. Let's see if you can listen and figure it out. So at the end of the line, the rhythmic surprise I throw in is this wonky hi-hat. The previous grooves are quantized, which means that all the rhythms are locked into a grid to create a consistent pulse. To contrast this and provide a final unexpected musical twist, I wrote this wonky, unquantized hi-hat rhythm which ebbs and flows. It swings in a way. You can take a look at it's unquantized because of these gaps right here. This style of drunk groove was made famous by Questlove's performances on Jay Dilla's and D'Angelo's music. Do you like this drum groove within the context of the whole piece? And that is the end of the video. Thank you so much if you made it all this way. If you learned something from this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can listen to Star Circuit 7 on Spotify and all other major streaming platforms. The link will be in the description below. Which section of this song is your favorite? And is this song good even though I lost the competition?